member for Battlefields Crowfoot. Battle River.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and as always, it is an honor to be able to enter into debate in this place, and especially when it comes to issues that are so very pressing related to national security and some of the challenges that that our nation is facing. And you know, especially, I would suggest that the whole discussion around cybersecurity, Madam Speaker, is especially relevant because we are seeing highlighted each and every day how it seems like a drip of new information related to foreign interference in our elections. And Madam Speaker, I think that it highlights how important the conversation around cybersecurity is, because it is often through computer means, through technological means, Madam Speaker, that these malicious foreign state actors will attack Canadian infrastructure. So, Madam Speaker, it's especially relevant that I rise to debate C-26 relating to the Liberals' recently introduced bill on cyber security. Madam Speaker, you know, I'd like to highlight a couple of things first. First 7 years of inaction, and I find it really interesting how after 7 years of what I certainly would suggest, and I know many experts in the field, certainly hearing at the Ethics Committee, we've heard a whole host of expert testimony on a whole range of issues, including cybersecurity, where it relates to this government being missing in action. Not even just inaction, but missing in action, Madam Speaker, when it comes to some of the key issues surrounding things like cybersecurity, and which has the direct consequence, I would suggest, to creating uncertainty both in terms of the technological space and the high-tech sector that has massive opportunities. You know, we hear the Ottawa area be referred to as Silicon Valley North. We have the Waterloo sector that has significant investment in the high-tech sector, and in my home province of Alberta, tremendous opportunity that has been brought forward through innovation, specifically in the Calgary area, where we're seeing massive advancements in tech. But this uncertainty over the last 7 years, the government has not taken action when it should have been providing clear direction so that industry and capital could prosper in our country. And it has inevitably, Madam Speaker, as a result, so that's on the investment and economic side, but likewise we see on the trust in governmental institutions side that we have seen an erosion of trust, whether it be the years-long delay on the decision regarding Huawei. Now, Madam Speaker, I and many Canadians, including experts in the field, as well as many within our Five Eyes security partners, that were baffled about this government's delay on taking clear and decisive action against Huawei, even though, Madam Speaker, our Five Eyes, which are a shared intelligence, a group of countries that share intelligence, have a strong intelligence working relationship, yet, Madam Speaker, we see how inaction eroded the trust that these other nations had in Canada's ability to respond to cyber concerns and threats, and the fact that a company that has clear connections to, as a state-owned enterprise, has clear connections to a malicious foreign actor. And Madam Speaker, how that delay led to incredible uncertainty in the markets, incredible costs taken on by private enterprise that simply didn't have direction. So imagine all those telecoms that may have purchased significant assets of Huawei infrastructure because the government refused to provide them direction. Madam Speaker, years and years of inaction. But to speak about specifically how important it is to understand the question around Canadian institutions. You see, Madam Speaker, when one, and I would hope that members of this House take seriously the reports that are tabled in this place, such as from the Public Safety Committee, which in the second session of the last Parliament I had the honor of being able to sit on. And there's a whole host of studies that have been done related to this. And then when it comes to CISA, CISA's tables reports in this place, and I'll tell you, it is astounding, some of the revelations about foreign state actors actors and their incursions and attempts to erode trust in Canadian institutions. And specifically the CSE report, there's a CSE report for 2021, I believe, is the most recent one that was tabled. And Madam Speaker, it talks about 3 to 5 billion, that's billion with a B, malicious incursions in our federal institutions a day via a cyber means. 3 to 5 billion incursions. Madam Speaker, that is an astounding number when it comes, and that doesn't include the incursions that would be whether hacks against individuals or corporations. That is simply federal government institutions. 3 to 5 billion a day. And then, of course, NSICOP tables reports as well, the RCMP, military intelligence. There's a whole host of agencies that are hard at work ensuring that work on many of these things. So it highlights how absolutely important it is. And I find it interesting because over the last 7 years, the Liberals have talked tough about many things, but delivered action on very, very few. And Huawei is a great example. Cybersecurity is another. We see a host of other concerns, which it would veer off topic of this discussion, Madam Speaker, so I'll make sure that I keep it directly focused on C-26 here today. But Madam Speaker, this Liberal government is very, very good at announcing things, but the follow-through often leaves much to be desired. So we see C-26 here before us today. Now, Madam Speaker, there's no question that action is needed. And I am thankful that we have the opportunity to be able to debate the substance of this bill in this place. And I know the hard work that will be done, certainly by Conservatives, I can't speak for the other parties at committee, to attempt to fix some of the concerns that have been highlighted and certainly have been highlighted by a number of my colleagues. But the reality is Canadians more and more depend on technology. And we saw how examples of when there's issues with that technology, the massive economic implications and disruptions that take place across our country. We saw that with the Rogers outage that took place in July. How most Canadians would not have realized that the debit card system, one of the foundational elements of our financial system, was dependent upon Rogers Network. So for a number of days, having disruptions in that space had significant economic implications. And it just speaks to one of the many ways that Canadians do depend on technology. And Madam Speaker, we saw an example in the United States, so not directly in Canada, but how it was the Colonial Pipeline. It faced a ransomware attack, where a major energy pipeline on the eastern seaboard of the United States was shut down through a cyber ransomware attack. And Madam Speaker, it caused massive disruptions. So I think that as we talk about, and just another Canadian example, it's been reported and talking to some in the sector that Bombardier Recreational Products, a Quebec company, has faced it's under a cyber lockdown because of hostile actions. And there's numerous other examples, whether it's in the federal government or provinces, where this has been faced. So, Madam Speaker, there's a number of concerns related to what needs to take place in this bill to ensure that we get it right. It needs to align with the actions that have taken place in our Five Eyes allies. We need to ensure that the civil liberties question is clearly answered, because we've seen this government not take concern over the rights of Canadians to see their rights protected, freedom of speech, whether that's C-11, and I know other parties support this backdoor censorship bill, but significant concern. So Canadians have right to question whether or not there will be a civil liberties impact, to make sure there's not opportunity for backdoor surveillance, to ensure that there are appropriate safeguards in place, and not giving too much power to politicians and bureaucrats as to what the actions of government would be. As was stated by one stakeholder in writing about this, the lack of guardrails to constrain abuse is very, very concerning. So, Madam Speaker, we have further in C-26, there's vague language that, and whenever there's vague language in legislation, that leaves it open to interpretation. And we've seen how in the Emergencies Act discussion and debate, the government created their own definition of some of the things that, even though it was, I would suggest, fairly clearly defined in legislation, we see that they created their own definition. So we have to make sure, Madam Speaker, that it is airtight. And Madam Speaker, the massive power that is given to the Minister of Industry in relation to many of the measures contained in this bill. So, Madam Speaker, I look forward to taking questions, because it is absolutely key that we get this right so that Canadians can, in fact, be protected when it comes to, and have confidence in their cybersecurity regime.
Comments. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Government House Leader. Senate.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I heard the member talk about Huawei quite a bit, and I couldn't help but reflect on the fact that the former contender to the current leader of the Conservative Party was actually on the legal team to support Huawei through its initiative to try to get onto the 5G network in Canada. So I can't help but wonder, why on earth, if the Conservatives are so against against Huawei and so against and treat this threat so seriously, why on earth would the Conservative Party of Canada had greenlit to run in that election, greenlit
If I may, the Honourable Member may know this is not the business of the House to deal with leadership issues of the different parties. I understand what the Honourable Member is trying to say, but just try to keep it to the legislation. Thank you.
Jean Charest was a lawyer for Huawei. This member brought up Huawei. Jean Charest is a well-known Conservative who ran in the leadership. Why would they have allowed Jean Charest to run in the leadership had that been the case?
The Honourable Member for Battle River Crowfoot.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I'll suggest, Madam Speaker, this has direct relevance to the debate at hand, because I'll tell you exactly why it has direct relevance. Because the victor of that race was not the individual that member referred to, but rather the member from Carleton, who I was proud to support and will be so pleased to ensure that we, as a majority Conservative government after a future election, has the opportunity to get things right and get this country back on track.
Questions et commentaires. Questions and comments. The Honourable Member for Perkwood Equal. L'Honourable Député de Beauport. Beauport.
The Honourable Member for Beauport, Île d'Orléans, Charlevoix. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to thank our colleague for his speech. I'd like for our colleague to reassure those listening, those who are in our communities, who are very concerned about what most of the day they're holding in their hands, their phone, something that lives with them in their house. It holds parts of their lives, intimate details, private conversations that they believe only belong to them. Our colleague doesn't seem to think that we should be doing more to control cyber attacks. So how can our colleague hope to reassure Canadians if we don't do more about this?
Crowfoot.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And, I think that it is absolutely key to the whole conversation that we're having is the fact that, and I can't hold up my cell phone, but we all, I imagine, all of us in this place, carry an incredibly powerful computing device that only a few years ago would have been something that you wouldn't have even seen in the most futuristic sci-fi type novels and movies. So, Madam Speaker, the space in which we're discussing cybersecurity has evolved so rapidly, and specifically to the question that the member asked regarding privacy. It's a very, very important one, and one that, as a member of the Ethics Committee that is responsible for privacy, we need to make sure that our legislation, including privacy legislation, both when it comes to the application of government and application when it comes to the privacy of all Canadians in terms of corporations and that whole space, we need need to ensure that the legislation that we have in this country reflects the modern realities. And in many cases, decades-old legislation needs to be updated to reflect the realities of today.
The Honourable Member for Port Moody Coquitlam.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And when we talk about the updated realities of today, persons with disabilities rely heavily on these technologies and this access. So my question to the member is this: if I think about persons with disabilities who rely on technologies for everyday barrier reduction interactions in their life, how can the rights to access, their rights to access, be protected?
The Honourable Member for Battle River Crowfoot.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And rights to access is absolutely key, and we've seen some incredible technological advancements that have helped those who face disabilities in a whole wide variety of things, Madam Speaker. And I think that when it comes, especially as I referred to, although outside of the context of what C26 directly address in terms of cybersecurity, it does have a particular connection, because if we don't have things like secure networks, if we don't ensure that our telecoms have consistent and stable networks that we can trust as a country, Madam Speaker, then access becomes a real issue, because malicious foreign state actors could take advantage of that, which would disadvantage all Canadians, but specifically those that depend on technology to mitigate things like disabilities.
Before we resume debate, à l'ordre, conformément à l'article